end quote. This modesty, considering his many successes and what our former provost Agnes called his genius, this modesty, but also fundamental goodness of these goals, sums up Dean McLeod. And I, for one, I'm proud to be a faculty member when he was here as dean. We are very thrilled and honored to have Mrs. McLeod in the audience with us today. And it's an honor to have her here as we remember Dean James McLeod. I'm not going to introduce the distinguished speaker, but I will say that Mrs. McLeod was a former graduate of Spelman College, and Dean McLeod himself was a graduate of Morehouse. So these are wonderful connections for today. The James E. McLeod Memorial Lecture in Higher Education honors Dean McLeod and addresses the role of the liberal arts in higher education, which was a subject very meaningful to him and shaped the incredible work he did here today. I'm going to briefly introduce Dean Tolliver Diallo, who's received her PhD from Stanford, and is Dean, Assistant Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences and Senior Lecturer in African and African American Studies. She advises the African Studies Association, an organization of both undergraduate and graduate students, as well as Black Anthology, the student-run theater production. She works closely with AFAS, advising students in the major, as well as the students she advises in the college. She sometimes teaches a course there and directs the Senegal Summer Program. And each spring, she coordinates the university's African Film Festival. If you'd like to come up, thank you so much, everybody. And we welcome you to the reception after the lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get started, I just wanted us to have a moment of silence for the students who were affected and impacted by the school shooting today at the Central Visual and Performing Arts High School and the surrounding schools that, as a result, went into lockdown. Thank you. As all of our communities continue to battle, and especially our school children continue to battle and try to understand gun violence, I just ask that you keep them and their families in your thoughts. It is a profound honor to introduce this year's McLeod Lecture speaker to you. Anytime I get the experience to talk about the life-changing experience that is Spelman College, is indeed a great day. So today it is a full circle moment for me. Yesterday, I returned from homecoming where I could catch up with classmates and also experience the current student body and see the fruits of Dr. Campbell's labor. I'm equally delighted that today's event highlights two significant figures. I have the opportunity to work for Dean James McLeod twice. Once as a high school student, I was speaker just in the summer, and second when I began here at the College of Arts and Sciences. A proud Morehouse man from Dothan, Alabama, who he was passionate about the role of liberal arts in solving contemporary problems. Indeed, Dean McLeod
raised millions of dollars in just 4 years, grew the endowment substantially, allowing the college to realize some infrastructural improvement and increased aid to students. More importantly, Dr. Campbell expanded Spelman's reach into the West End community with programs with the Atlanta Public Schools to enhance literacy and math proficiency. Before she left, Dr. Campbell broke down on the new Center for the Innovation in Arts, which Spelman will name after her. Before becoming president of Spelman College, Dr. Campbell served as the dean of Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. There, she developed new programs, including the NYU Game Center, the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music, Moving Image Archiving and Preservation Program, and a joint MBA, MFA Graduate Film and Business Program. She also founded and chaired Tisch's Department of Art and Public Policy, which examined the intersection of art, politics, and public policy as it impacts individual artists and the institutions that support them. Dr. Campbell began her work as the director of the Studio Museum in Harlem. Her leadership there was recognized as a, quote, linchpin in the economic revitalization of Harlem. She served as the city's Cultural Affairs Commissioner under 2 mayors, and in 2009, she was appointed vice chair of President Obama's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, where she championed the arts as one of the ingredients essential to effective public school education. In terms of her own scholarship, Dr. Campbell received the Medal of Distinction from the American Academy in Rome. In 2018, she received the Benjamin Hooks National Book Award for her book, An American Odyssey, The Life and Work of Romary Bearden. Dr. Campbell received her BA in English from Swarthmore, earned her master's in art history, as well as her PhD in the humanities from Syracuse University. She holds numerous honorary degrees and sits on several boards of arts and philanthropic organizations. As you enter the gates of Spelman College, there is a sign that reads, Spelman, Women Who Serve. How fitting it is that Dr. Campbell will speak to us today on the role of institutions of higher education and their responsibility to under-resourced and underserved schools. I am very excited to introduce to you Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Tolliver Diallo. That was such a generous introduction. And it is quite wonderful to see some of our Spelman alumni, particularly a recent one. So good to see you. Thank you for coming. You'll have to excuse me, but I'm going to sit during this. I feel a little bit like Mom's Mosley, you know, she used to always say, I'm so tired. I'm going to sit down in this chair during this presentation. So thank you. I see there are some people from my generation who know who Mom's Mosley is, right? So I have to say, Ms. McLeod, I am so honored to be here this afternoon to be at a lecture that is a memorial to your husband. I didn't know him, I'd never met him, but I did some reading about him. And I thank you so much for sharing with us his impact here at Washington University. Because from what I read, he was exactly the kind of college administrator you would want on behalf of your students and your faculty. So thank you for the to be able to be here this afternoon for this lecture. Today is what responsibility, if any, do colleges and universities have for K-12 public education? And I'll say very, very quickly that I'm an art historian by training and a curator by experience, not a scholar of public school education. But my interest in the topic is more than cursory. And in the recitation of the details of my career, in pretty much every place where I have served, I have been involved in public school education. When I was at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and mind you, when I started at the Studio Museum, it was a loft over a liquor store and a Kentucky Fried Chicken. That was our museum. It's now has a David Ajay building under construction, so it has come a very, very long way indeed. But even back then, we would send working artists into public schools. And when we became an accredited fine arts museum, we would start working with the superintendents in the school districts with an effort to make sure that those artists were working on behalf of student success. When I went to city government to serve first for under Mayor Koch and then under David Dinkins, I worked with the superintendent of New York City schools. And there we engaged many of the city's great cultural institutions like the Metropolitan Museum, the Planetarium and Natural History, Public Theater, to serve those students who were living in New York City. Then they would put homeless families in abandoned hotels. And the superintendent said, if you can serve those students who are in those abandoned hotels, those homeless students, he said, then we can talk. And we put together a program that did just that. And we had several different grades. The students who participated showed incredible improvements in their attendance, their academic performance, the lack of disciplinary issues that they would encounter. When I became the vice chair for the Obama administration, the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, we put together a program that was designed to bring the arts into failing public schools. We deliberately went to the list of failing schools and chose 8 different states. And I mean, cities as different as Portland, Oregon, Des Moines, Iowa, Lame Deer, Montana, Boston, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., very different schools, different populations. And we designed programs that would put the arts into these schools in a way that would help the students, again, with their academic performance to great success. And we, when I left the Obama administration, they had expanded from the 8 individual schools to 15 different school districts. And not knowing who was going to succeed Barack Obama, we moved the program out of the federal government to the Kennedy Center. Because of course, Donald Trump got rid of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, right? Very soon after he was elected. And of course, I was involved in public schools at Spelman, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So these experiences left me with a really profound respect for the men and women who have chosen public school education as their vocation. They have difficult jobs, which they do with scarce resources. We didn't encounter a single school where people had anywhere near the resources they needed in order to do the job that needed to be done. So I'm not an expert, but I'm an ally. And I'm an ally who feels a growing sense of urgency about the state of K-12 education, what our students are now missing today, and therefore what is missing when these students leave their K-12 education to become citizens. COVID has certainly heightened the sense of urgency. But after experiencing K-12 education over the course of a 40+ year career, I can tell you we should have been taking action long before COVID complicated an already difficult situation, which brings me to my experience at Spelman College. For those who may be unfamiliar with Spelman, and I was going to recite all the wonderful things that Dean Tolliver Diallo recited, it is an extraordinary academic institution. And in addition to all the rankings that you quoted, the National Science Foundation has ranked us #1 in the country as the leading producer of Black women who pursue PhDs in the STEM field. Spelman has fared well in the marketplace, so to speak. Over the past 10 years, there's been a 240% increase in our applications. And as a result, our selectivity has dropped to 28%. So it has a very strong presence in the marketplace. It's very much in demand. We don't have the endowment of Wash U, but it's healthy. We're a healthy school and responsibly healthy. We have a 76% 6-year graduation rate. We'd like for it to be 100%, and we're actually striving towards that. And we do that, and this is, I think, an important part of our profile. We do that with a student body population that is well over a third Pell eligible, which is not the case for many of America's elite. I'll say this very honestly. So coming to Spelman and looking at those statistics, I thought, wow, we should really be proud of what we do on behalf of excellence and equity in higher education. That was until I had dinner with a group of principals from Southwest Atlanta. And let me tell you a little bit about our neighborhood, the West End of Atlanta. The median income of our 99% Black neighborhood is $37,000. Now, to put that into context, in Atlanta, the median annual income for white families is $140,000. So these are communities, and you know how schools are funded, right? They're funded based on real estate, property taxes, and all of that. So you can see just from that there are very severe disparities, and I'll talk about some of those other disparities a little bit more. That evening that I invited the principals over, there are 5 public schools in the Atlanta, what they call Washington cluster. 1 elementary, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school. So I invited all the principals over for dinner, and I'll be very honest. We thought, we're going to invite them over. I'm going to show them all the great things that Spelman does for the schools, right? The principals were very polite and they listened. And then afterwards, we said, how can we be even more helpful? And there came the answer that would stun me. To a person, elementary, middle, and high school, they said, teach our students to read. Elementary, middle, and high school. They went on to explain that the reading proficiency was so low that it trailed the student from elementary school into middle school. And by the time you get to middle school, if you don't have proficiency, it impacts your ability to do math, to study history, to study any other. And then, of course, even if you manage to graduate, it is a deficiency that basically stays with you for the rest of your life. They didn't discuss math proficiency, but the math proficiency issue is the same citywide. And I have a slide. I don't know if anybody's advancing the slide. If there is somebody advancing the slides, I have a slide that's going to show you math proficiency in high schools. Thank you. You are. Laura's been a great companion all day today. Rescued me several times.
as well.
Oh, okay, here we are. Thank you. So if you look, this is a slide that looks at the 11 high schools that are in Atlanta. Of the 11 high schools, 8 of them are completely resegregated. By that, I mean, there are no white students at 8 of the 11 Atlanta high schools. If you take the 11 high schools and you look at the math proficiency scores, you ready for the next slide? Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but the little circles in red are the high schools that were not segregated. That is the high schools that had, significant numbers of white students. The math proficiency is up, in the higher quartile. And then those schools that were predominantly Black, you can see on the right are the green circles. They fall in the lower register. So the point is that not only do we have a literacy problem in Atlanta, we also have a math proficiency problem. Why is that important? Well, if you don't get the math courses you need in middle school, you can't take the requisite math courses in high school. And if you don't have the requisite math courses in high school, there's not a chance for you to excel in STEM subjects, right? By the time you get to college. So the math issue, along with the literacy issue, is a serious issue in Atlanta. So let's look at the state of Missouri in general and St. Louis in particular. On March 21st, and can I have the next slide? On March 21st, 2021, the St. Louis Dispatch published an article that focused on St. Louis schools with this alarming headline. It's a crisis. Advocates make new push to boost literacy in St. Louis area. In the body of the article was this sentence. St. Louis schools struggle to teach kids, especially Black kids, to read. In some city schools, fewer than 10% of third graders test proficient in reading. These are the schools that are in the promise zone. And I'm afraid I don't have the definition of what qualifies a school district for being a promise zone. But these are the schools that are in the promise zone in the state of Missouri. And you can see total proficiency in one column, Black proficiency in the next column. For these schools, just go down, and St. Louis is down there at 11.9%, and the total Black population. So you can see very clearly that schools that are predominantly Black from this chart, the Black students tend to have lower proficiencies in reading. These are reading scores for St. Louis. I do know that I guess promise zones are high poverty urban and rural areas so designated by housing and urban development that are eligible for federal support. That's promise zones. So Washington University, like Spelman, resides in a city where literacy is an issue in K-12 public schools. And like Atlanta, the lack of reading proficiency is crippling Black students disproportionately. Like Spelman, your institution is a beacon of excellence in your community. And I probably don't have to recite these statistics to you. Your number, US News and World Report says that you're number 15 in the nation. You have a relatively diverse student body population. Your endowment is $8.1 billion, one of the strongest in the country. You could do a little more with the diversity of faculty and staff as I look at the statistics, but your heart seems to be in the right place. And I could imagine that, you're in a place that is as stellar and wonderful as this, you could say, we're doing all the right things. And I certainly felt that way about Spelman before I had dinner with those principals. And I just could not get it out of my mind. Teach our students to read. Atlanta and St. Louis are not anomalies in this country. 54% of the adult population has a below 6th grade prose literacy proficiency. What does that mean? It means 130 million adults in this country can't read a newspaper or can't follow enough of a text to read a book or a novel or read an instructional manual or a brochure. That is right now, over 54%. The revelation about the schools in the Washington cluster stunned me, and for those of us at Spelman who attended dinner that night, it felt like a mandate, and we got to work. Spelman has a great education department with terrific leadership and highly motivated faculty. And we also have a community service program. It's called the Bonner program. And they agreed that they would take some of their resources to help us put them towards developing a literacy program using the expertise of our own students. 3 of the public school principals collaborated with us. We engaged a reading literacy program called Book Nook, as well as the reading specialists for the schools in the Washington cluster, and literally designed a literacy program from scratch. On our initial call to Spelman students, 200 students responded. Ultimately, 100 were trained and sent out into the schools. And years later, I learned, actually at the conference that we attended, Provost, that in fact, high impact, high intensity one-to-one tutoring is probably the most effective intervention that you can make in order to improve literacy. By now, we have had 5 years of the program. And we have had 700, I thought we had 795 unique Spelman students. I just got an update of the figures today. We now have over 1,000 unique Spelman students who have participated, and about an equal number of students in public schools who have been tutored through them. And we continued the tutoring through COVID, through online, and now we're back in the schools. And after 2 years, after the first 2 years, we actually invited the reading specialists from the Washington cluster to share with my board of trustees the impact that we had made. And let's go to the next slide. So you can see that in the 3rd and 4th grades, the growth rate from before we call it spell reads. Isn't it lovely? I love it. So we call it spell reads before that and the after. And there is a material impact that has been made for those students in 3rd and 4th grade. As you go up in the grades, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, the impact gets less and less. So we learn from that. If you want to really make change, you have to start early. And that's where you have to start. And that's where we're concentrating most of our energy and our efforts now. But the other thing that we learned is that it was not just about the literacy. In addition to teaching and to learning how to teach literacy, the tasks required on the part of our students, consistency, persistence, and most importantly, deep caring for the students being taught. We learned that being dependable and showing up in the lives of those being tutored was as important as the tutoring itself. We learned that intellectual capital is every bit as valuable as financial capital, and that our Spelman students gained as much as the students they tutored. I had the privilege of listening to some of them read out loud. And I could hear the joy in their reading to the students whom they were tutoring. And though COVID disrupted our pace, it didn't stop us. And the program, as I said, is now resumed this year with federal funding from one of our Democratic Georgia senators. And that was an advertisement, I'm sorry. Spelman's experience with Spell Reads caused us to be alert for similar programs, and we didn't have to look far. A Spelman faculty member brought to our attention another program, this one for math proficiency, that originated 30 years ago at Wayne State for Detroit public schools, and now has extended to 9 other college campuses around the country. Our Spelman faculty member was Dr. Viveka Brown when she started. She's now Dr. Viveka Vaughn, so I just congratulated her. But she proposed that we bring Math Core to Spelman, which she did this summer. And we start out with about 50 students, high school and middle school. And the principle is this: the faculty at Spelman train a group of college students, there are about 10 of them, and they're part of the team. They train these 10 team members to teach high school students some college math, as well as math that the middle school students should be getting in their middle school education. The high school students then teach and tutor the middle school students. And it's the similar principle of the students teaching students, but this time going back down in through high school and into middle school. And it's a summer program, so it's an intensive program. There's 4 days of instruction, and there's some recreational things on Friday. And again, dramatic change. I just received the results last night and didn't have a chance to put them up as slides. But dramatic jumps in their proficiency in math for the students who participated. During the academic year, the students have to pledge to come to Saturday sessions so that they don't have experience a learning loss. And our hope is to continue this and to continue to build the numbers in math proficiency up to the levels of what we have for the literacy. So it's easy for us to see that why our students are so passionate about what they do at Spelman. And so the question is, would there be that same passion at a place like Wash U? That's a question. That's a question actually for Wash U to think about and talk about, but it's a question. But it is the case that since the mid-19th century, our country has linked a robust democracy with high-quality public school education. Horace Mann, one of the leading advocates of universal public school education, believed that the stability of democracy depended on literate, educated citizens. Beyond our borders, several thinkers have linked good public school education with the practice of freedom. Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, in his 1968 landmark book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, argued for an education that enables collaboration between students and teachers, that instills agency in each student. Freire believed that the banking approach to education, in which information is simply deposited in the minds of students, leaves them susceptible to simply consuming ideological orthodoxies that oppress them. Agency and the practice of freedom resonate in the literacy practice of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a Kenyan poet, playwright, essayist, and novelist. In his early years, Ngugi taught literacy in rural Kenya by encouraging his adult students to participate in the creation of theater that examined critically their post-colonial condition. Another advocate who sees the relationship between literacy and freedom is the Nobel laureate, Amartya Sen. In an October 28th article in The Guardian, Sen writes that not to be able to read or write or count or communicate is a tremendous deprivation And he sees that deprivation that is not just educational, but economic as well. So you consider for a moment what the deprivation of not being literate above the 6th grade might be. Consider how that literacy would impede the ability to manage healthcare, your own healthcare needs, or how it might reduce employment opportunities, or make it less likely for someone to argue for their civil or legal rights. We know that an early predictor of incarceration is failure to read at grade level by 3rd grade. Failure at math proficiency as well limits opportunity. Most tech jobs, forecasted to be one of the fastest growing sectors of the labor market, require basic levels of computational proficiency. Our shocking K-12 literacy rates that are especially rampant in urban centers worry me because they point to a growing divisiveness in this country. And I'm not talking about political divides. Even though red states and blue states are far apart in their social and fiscal policies, even though the divisions between those who are for more gun control and those who are not seem irreconcilable, tragically, we see the results of that all the time. Even though the pro-abortion versus anti-abortion rift will probably never heal, I believe that the divide between the highly educated and the not so well educated in this country will be even just as devastating as any other divide. Any number of surveys tell us that a growing number of high school students are not considering college as an option. Is that an economic choice? Is it that college is not affordable? Or is it a question of preparedness? Is it a question of interest? I suspect all of that. During COVID, a shocking number of students rejected the claims of scientific fact. Facts about COVID infection and COVID spread regarding everything from wearing masks to the efficacy of vaccines were discounted. The result was the United States had one of the highest mortality rates from COVID in the developing world. Every college and university in this country needs to ask itself, what is our role in responding to the growing disbelief in scientific fact? I don't think it's unrelated to literacy. There's no question that colleges and universities will suffer if current trends continue. The best of the best will suffer less, but over time, we will be creating a population that will be increasingly hostile to education in general and to higher education in particular. Resistance to higher education funding and interventions from state legislators already reflect this hostility. In closing, I urge all of us to think big. In the past, when it comes to education, as a country, we have thought big and it's been transformational. I'll take, for example, the story of Spelman College. Spelman and most other HBCUs, not all of them, but most other HBCUs were born in the aftermath of the Civil War. The Civil War ended, 4 million slaves were emancipated, and how were they going to be educated? Under very different circumstances, HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, came into being. In the case of Spelman, there were 2 Baptist missionaries who came down to Atlanta. They were determined to start a school for emancipated Black women in 1881. A Black pastor by the name of Reverend Quarles gave him the basement of his church, Friendship Baptist Church. It's still a thriving church in Atlanta to this day. And the 2 women, Sophia Packard and Harriet Giles, managed to attract the attention of a major industrialist, John D. Rockefeller. And the school was named for his wife, Laura Spelman Rockefeller. Her family were avid abolitionists. The reputation, and it was a seminary at first, and it was later became a college in early 20th century. From the very beginning, this college for Black women established an outstanding reputation. Alice Walker in The Color Purple has one of her characters attend Spelman College, and the character writes to her a letter to her sister in 1924 and refers to Spelman as astonishing. W. Roundtree, W. Johnson Roundtree, who was a real Spelman graduate in 1938, wrote in her autobiography, A Mighty Justice, that in the 1930s, the mission of the college was to train young Black women to think, to hold jobs, to become leaders. That was Spelman's mission. It has sustained that mission for 142 years. That is an amazing feat. I just want to say that. We can do whatever we think we want to do, right? During World War II, I'll give you another example. During World War II, the GI Bill came into being. No one thought it would have the impact it had, which was to make college possible for literally millions of working class veterans and change the prospects for prosperity for families and for this country. When I was in my lifetime, in 1957, I was 10 years old, and the then Soviet Union put Sputnik into orbit. And the United States was outraged because the Russians got ahead of us and poured tens of millions of dollars into public schools and they created NASA at that time, beefed up all the federal agencies in the sciences in order to compete with what they thought was a threat. I went to public schools, all public schools, elementary, middle, and high school. I had a great education in Philadelphia public schools. I grew up in inner city Philadelphia. This country has shown over and over again that when it wants to make transformational change, it can. We have the resources. We have the interest, I know, on the part of our students and our faculty and others. All we need is the will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell. That was incredible. You've given us a lot to think about. The Center of the Humanities here at WashU, and I realized in my excitement, I didn't introduce myself. I'm the director. My name is Stephanie Kirk. But we have been thinking about, how to engage as a center, as a place that thinks about the humanities. How do we engage with what's going on in our community, and how do we engage with K-12 education? It has become a priority for us. So you've given us much to think about, and I really am very grateful for that. And we have some time for questions, so please. Yes, at the back.
That is a great question, and you are right. There is an ethos of service, and everybody at Spelman has to serve in one way or another. And as I said, we had a whole program set up that we could easily convert and direct to, or at least aspects of it, to this spell reads, right? And we had, you know, administrators who were in that program who could immediately take hold of that, and you know, everything. There was being able to do that program was kind of ready-made for Spelman. It requires. I was listening to the description of Dr. McLeod. And one of the things that's very striking about listening to his description of him, Dr. Kirk, and reading about him is that he seemed to have the capacity to put his finger on the pulse of where that ethos resided here at WashU, and to the benefit of students and faculty alike. And that's what it takes. I mean, you're quite right. It's only going to work if people really, really want to do it. And so you have to look around this environment. They're here. I guarantee you they're here. You have to look around this environment and find those people who are really passionate, because it's not the kind of work or not the kind of service where you kind of, you know, show up. It has to be from the heart that you're bringing your heart. And I had a great conversation this earlier today with a group of students who are Mellon Mays students, honor students. I could hear that from the students that I spoke to today. So I know it's here.
Please.
Introduce yourself. And a very successful poet at that, who's already won at least one poetry award, right? Am I right? Yes, congratulations. Yeah, that's a great question. That was the question that we sought to answer with the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities. And worked very hard at designing how we could bring art and artists into the learning process. It wasn't specifically for literacy, it was for a whole array of academic disciplines. But you're quite correct. There's an opportunity here, and an opportunity for somebody to very creatively bring that into the arena. The design, the literacy design that our education department and Book Nook came up with did not include the arts, but that's not a reason why it could not include the arts. Absolutely, and we've seen evidence of the success of that. Yeah. So that's something for you to do, Ariana.
Yeah, it's a nice small challenge for you. Any more questions? We have some time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Alicia. Yes, so yes, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you speak up just a little bit? So That's a really good question. And I'm going to tell you a story. When I first came to Atlanta, I was so excited about the possibility. Oh, the question, and let me repeat the question. The question is, how did Spelman build its coalition and collaboration with public schools in Atlanta? At first, badly. And I'll be very honest, I went to the then superintendent, not the one who's superintendent now, and I can't remember her name, but I went to the superintendent of the schools, and I was so excited because I was still part of the president's committee, and I wanted to bring the same program we did with the president's committee, I wanted to bring to Atlanta. And she very politely said, I have so many people from the outside wanting to help the Atlanta schools. They're tripping all over each other in these schools. And I respect that. What made our program with Spelman so different is that the principals at that dinner made the request to us. Very specifically. All of them. And then 3 of them, it was one, M. Agnes Jones, elementary school, and 3 of the middle schools. They came forward and said, we want to work with you. And they were part of the design. Spelman didn't go off and say, okay, let's think up something. And you know, they were part of the design, the reading specialists from the schools. I mean, it was a group, a team effort to design the program in the first place. So it seems to me, for it to have some legitimacy, there has to be a great deal of reciprocity. Everybody has to sit around the table. Everybody has to want to be at the table. And everybody has to decide that we're in this for real, for the long haul. It's been 5 years now that we have been through COVID, that we have been doing this program.
There's a question at the front here.
So luckily, Spelman had a long history of, the question was, how do we facilitate the conversation with the principals in the first place? So luckily, the Bonner, we have a program called the Bonner Scholars. And it's a program that has supported students with scholarship funds, and they do over and beyond in terms of community service. So the college had a relationship with public schools, and specifically with schools in the neighborhood. I remember the late Dr. Jane Smith, who was a Spelman alumna, knew some of the principals personally. So when we extended the invitation for the principals to come to dinner, there was a comfort. You know, there was a comfort with Spelman, a comfort with Dr. Smith, they were coming to a familiar place. It wasn't just out of the blue. So which means that it took a long time to build up the relationship, the trust, the comfort level. So I don't think it does not happen overnight.
This will be our last question. Well, we have, okay, 2 questions. We'll make them in very quickly. Go ahead, please.
Wow. Mhm. Yeah. So the question was, started with a description of the very, what sounds like a very rich menu of programs here at WashU, between WashU and public schools in St. Louis. But the question is, how do you bring those programs together in a way that they really have more of an impact as opposed to separate silos? Takes leadership. You know, when the principals asked that question, honestly, I felt like I was almost being personally charged. And I took a really personal interest in spell reads. And we were able to identify somebody in the Bonner program who was really passionate about it. And as I said, our education program, but I was talking to people every week, all the time. And to ask them to show those results to our board of trustees, I mean, that was unusual. But people got the message very quickly. This is an important program. And then when we got the funding from Senator Ossoff, which of course was led out of the president's office to get an earmark for this program, it made it even more clear that this is like a really important program. Somebody has to be the captain of the effort.
Thank you. And the last question, please. And before you ask your question, I'd just like to invite everybody to continue the conversation after this, at the reception that we'll be having. Thank you.
Oh boy, is that a great question. And the question is, how do we teach our teachers to teach our students? And this is an absolutely critical question, and colleges and universities have to take responsibility for it. These are where the schools of education are, right? The undergraduate schools and the graduate schools. So we are responsible for teaching those teachers to teach. And as I said, one of the things that I've learned since I've gotten, so involved in this was to hear from the policy analyst at Brown, who was stressing the need for the high quality training that goes into high impact tutoring. So you're absolutely right. Programs like Spell Read, I'm very proud of Spell Reads. Math Core is great, but we're always going to be at the edges unless we do fundamentally get to the heart of the matter, which is understanding and teaching our teachers how to teach more effectively. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So on that note, yes, please do join us at the reception to continue the conversation. You've left us with a lot to think about. Thank you all for your questions. Thanks to those of you who joined us online. It's been really, really quite interesting. Thank you.